Good morning, friends. It's Tori with Swordguy Builds. I'm out here today at the request of a friend to give some tips on Hassett's Four Corners. So at the 2019 Whip Convention, Adam Winrich, of course, put on a workshop about the Four Corners, and I was lucky enough to be able to attend. And he had a whip, a stock whip, I suppose, that he made, and he had us like kind of take turns using it, trying to do the Four Corners. And two things that I noticed about the whip: it had a lot of weight out into the thong, maybe not a lot really, but more than I usually do, more than I was expecting, and really I think that that's the pivotal part, the very important part. But also it had a longer handle than I was expecting. It was probably like 18-inch or whatever, but I almost never go that long on my own handles. I really should. I don't know why I don't. So that's the first point that I think is really important, is that the whip that you use, I mean, you can arguably use any whip to do Four Corners, but it'll be a lot easier if you have a whip that has more weight out into the thong. The first one that I'm going to be demonstrating with is this stock whip made for me by Eddie Vasquez, and I really like it. It does have more weight out in the thong than I usually do, and I think that for this move it's highly desirable, very beneficial. So that, of course, is the basic motion. Some prereqs that you can work on to get yourself closer to doing the full Four Corners are maybe Sydney Flash. Again, Adam Winrich has a video or two, maybe a few, on the modifications that the Sydney Flash can take that lead up to the Four Corners. And my own linking skills are not great, but I'm going to try to link to his the video that I'm thinking about, because that'll probably help a lot. Other moves that you can work on to get yourself closer to Four Corners include the helicopter, your overhead volleys, your underhanded overhead volleys, so I would say, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree, that overwhelmingly the best type of whip to use for this move is going to be a stock whip. Pretty much all the whips that I've got with me right now are stock whips, and that is because this move is not very intuitive, in that in most of whip cracking, your volley type moves dictate that the whip change direction after every single crack, and that becomes intuitive for people when they have like a small amount of experience, right? But the thing about Four Corners is that it only changes direction after every two cracks. So you're basically cracking it this way and then cracking it that way again, and then cracking it the opposite direction, and then cracking it that same way, and it's just a very different thing to get used to. So the reason that you will probably want to use stock whips for it is that they have, you know, the little joint up at the top, and it just makes it a lot easier for it to move around. You need that flexibility, you need that that elbow in it in order to, like, you can do it with a bull whip or really anything else, but it's just gonna wear out the whip, you know? And of course, like I mentioned before, it will also help a lot to have more weight out in the thong. Like, a lot of people start out making bull whips or snake whips or whatever, and they move from that into stock whips, and they just use the same construction methods. I mean, I did, and that basically means that you're gonna start very fat as you're gonna have it, and then taper down immediately. But that's not necessarily best for this move, for this specific move. One of the best pieces of advice that I can personally give on this subject for this move is what's very difficult to grasp about it is this very staccato metronome hand motion that you have to do. You might want to, when you're first starting, you're probably going to be doing something like this, but that won't do it. It has to be this really abrupt strike motion, you know? It has to strike forward and it has to strike back and then stop and then strike forward again. So here's Eddie's whip again. And I really have to admit, this whip feels very, very nice doing that motion. One thing that I also should mention is another thing you might be inclined to do is this sort of motion, like rotating around the middle of your handle, you know, just because it's a lot of weight to move around, and pardon me, and it is easier on your hand to like swivel around it, because then the whip doesn't have to move as far, it's less strain, but you will have to really, your hand is the point of pivot, you know, all the way out to the side and then all the way out to the other side. What I feel myself doing, I'm not sure if I'm actually doing it, but it feels this way, is that I'm actually bringing it all the way even further out, especially just to get this crack. I don't have as much trouble getting that one, but basically I feel myself even moving my hand side to side to spread the front cracks out even more. I feel like that helps. The next whip I've got with me here today is this brown and green stock whip that I made. My guess is that it will not be as easy to do this move with it because I did make it lighter than Eddie made his. It's maybe a little tougher, but not quite as tough as I expected it to be. It is quieter, which means that I need to put more force into it in order to get the cracks. That's another thing that I think you will pretty much have to do regardless of what whip you're using. It's such a specialized motion that you don't really see anywhere else in whip cracking, that especially for the front cracks, you're really going to have to throw it and tug it, you know, in a fine way. Don't, you know, cast it and then like immediately draw it back toward your face like newbies do. You're gonna hit yourself. But backward tension a little bit, more than a little bit, is also key. The next one that I've got is this 5-foot stock, one of Peter Thorndike's that I won at the other whip convention, and I really like this whip a lot. I don't take it out as much as I would like to, but I have very high expectations for the performance on this one. Okay, this one does have a little bit longer handle, 18-inch I believe, a little longer than I'm used to, so it's a little bit tougher for me personally, but it does have a very favorable weight distribution for this move. This last one, just for kicks, is I think it's a 6-foot stock whip that I made in the style of Save the Queen from Final Fantasy VIII, which is one of my favorites. They're all your favorites. So this one is very long. I don't really expect to be able to do it very well with this one, but I figure, you know, the experience can't hurt. It also has a lot of weight, admittedly toward the end of the thong, which is not great. I've changed my construction since then, but we'll see. Not great on that one, not terrible. So I hope very much that that helps. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Please post questions. I'll do my best to answer them. Make sure to drop me suggestions for future topics or whatever. And I will hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks a bunch. One other thing that I wanted to say is that, I feel as makers, it's our job to come at the craft from as many angles as possible. There are so many variables. It's difficult for one person to fully wrap their head around it all, you know? And for that reason, I think if you're a maker, you should make all kinds of whips. You should use other people's work. Just experiment, learn as much as you can. Being a better handler and a more with more versatile mastery over actually using different work will make you a better maker. Same goes if you're like a newbie handler. If you can, use as many different types of whips as possible. Different lengths, different styles, bull whips, stock whips, snake whips, you know, long snake whips I think are really good for learning the basics. All of these things together I think will make you a better handler, a better maker, and not that I'm a great example of this, but it'll make you better at communicating different nuances of handling or making. Okay, that's all. Thanks a bunch.